going to ruin your entire. Now I'm talking about Andrew Meyer and Andrew Tate. Please just say something when you're actually on and can speak. I see that you text me, but I'm not sure what it says. Andrew
I
Meyer.
think he's doing a live right now with his
Okay.
brother.
Okay, so he's gonna jump on. Andrew Meyer, I wanted to have as many people that deem themselves to be Zionists to say how they feel about this and what specifically it is that you believe is anti-Semitism. If an American or any other person does not agree with the actions of Israel or believes that we should have our pedophiles giving back to us and they shouldn't be seeking refuge in Israel because we're giving them billions of dollars, like what do you think registers to some people as, okay, that's anti-Semitism?
Hey, Candace, long time. Good to talk to you. Been a while. My complaint has never been that people are discussing Israel or anything like that. I don't cry anti-Semitism. My complaint is very specific. The things that I've wanted to discuss with you, even with Dan, just in his recent comments, the idea that it's allowed because of our religion for Jews to rob or steal or do even worse things to people just because they're not Jewish. It's just patently wrong. I know that you can find quotes from the Talmud that look bad, but if you keep reading, it basically says you can't do anything like that. And in Shulchan Aruch, for example, Dan was saying that it's okay for us to steal, to do other things to Gentiles. It says it's forbidden to rob or to cheat even a minor amount from either a Jew or a Gentile. We are not allowed to lie, not allowed to steal. It says it in the Talmud, not allowed to lie. So the things that are being spoken about, if you want to speak about Israel, there's a lot to talk about. I too think that October 7th, very, very strange that the IDF wouldn't have noticed paragliders coming into the country. So I don't mind people speaking about that. I think that Netanyahu does a deep disservice to that country. So you want to speak about that, go for it. And I can imagine after working for Ben Shapiro, you would have a lot to say about the Jews because Ben Shapiro is not the best example of a Jew. So I can more than imagine you wanting to speak out about a lot of things after disconnecting from such a sick system. Thanks for having me on. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Andrew, just to toss that back to you, and I will now say, like, I've done a ton of research on, like, psychoanalysis movement and pedophilia. I actually have not done any research on the Talmud, and so I can't answer for anything that you're saying. But I have seen people that do share verses from the Talmud and think that it signifies that children can be raped. So could you just provide like a more broad and maybe assign more clarity to what you're saying? Are you like exactly what is the Talmud? Is it conversations? I've heard this loosely, and please correct me if I'm wrong. I'm happy to be learn here. Is it conversations that rabbis are having or like questions that they're asking? Like what actually is the Talmud?
So the Talmud is a level of Torah study. I just did a whole debate on this, like 2 hours, with Daniel Hakikachu. He's like the top Muslim debater in this entire space. You can go watch every single quote that he pulled out. I explained it to him. The stuff that people are talking about, it's sometimes not literal because the Talmud, like the Zohar, is often an esoteric text. It's rabbis talking about things in a manner that is not always literal. Like you can look at the words even when it's saying in the Zohar, oh, they went for a walk, they were walking. It means they were studying Torah. It doesn't necessarily mean they're going for a walk. There's a lot of things that are missed when you try and look at these things literally. And then also a lot of the quotes that are posted, some of them are just patently false. Like there's one from a book called Libra David. It doesn't even exist. It's not a book that exists. And then a lot of stuff pulled out of the Talmud, they're completely missing what happens next. And the thing that I wanted to speak to you about specifically, Candace, when you say Sigmund Freud is a Kabbalist is a very elevated, it's a very righteous rabbi. That's someone like Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. That's someone like Rabbi Moshe Chaim Lutzato. That's someone like the Ari, Isaac Luria. These are very, very exalted people. Sigmund Freud is not a Kabbalist. He may have been an occultist. I haven't studied him. He probably was. I've never been a fan of the man. But to say that he's a Kabbalist absolutely is not true. And that's one of the conversations like this, I think, are good because you get to learn exactly what it is you're dealing with. To say he's a Kabbalist, not true at all.
Let's go through this one by one so that we don't get too diverted. The first one is the Talmud saying that it's okay to have sex with somebody that's under 9 years old. Let's address that one. Let's start there. That's
Okay.
Sanhedrin 54b
Yeah, hold on.
and 55.
Yeah, I had a whole thing of notes. Hold on. Okay, this one's 59a. Often cited false quote. Rabbi Yohanan says a Gentile who engages in Torah study is liable to receive. Oh no, this is a different section of that.
No. Sanhedrin 54b and 55.
While you're pulling that up, Andrew, I do just want to say that you saying that him worshiping the Kabbalah is false. I just want to know that was another Jewish author, and he is a psychologist as well, David Bacon. The book for that, just so people can source that, is Sigmund Freud and the Jewish mystical tradition, and he speaks about how he was basically initiated into the Kabbalah at the age of 35 by his father, which actually explains why he shifted his opinion from believing all of the women who said that they were raped, the Jewish women who said that they were raped, going into this assault on truth, and then radically changing his opinion once he was initiated. So I would dispute that that's false, but just letting you know that that's not a Candace Owens thought, and it's also not an anti-Semitic thought because these are both Jewish.
No, I'm not saying I'm not trying to say you're anti-Semitic for it.
No. I'm saying that for clarity for other people who thought that came from me. It didn't come from me. It came from Jewish authors. But I do want to stick to the Sanhedrin so you can answer that section.
But just so you're aware, when you cite people like that, like people like to cite this thing, oh, the Talmud says there's 9 genders. When you look up where that comes from, it's from literally a tranny going around and calling himself a rabbi. Like that's insanity.
Well, okay. Listen, but I just want to address them one at a time. So let's not get sidetracked here. Let's go with Sanhedrin.
The discussion.
54b. Yeah. And 55.
So the discussion in the Gemara, Sanhedrin 54b, is what to consider as sex and what to consider as damage. It's not saying that it's allowed. They're discussing what the various penalties would be. If there's sex, the rapist must be stoned to death. That's the penalty. If there's damage, there must be compensation. And what it's talking about, the 9 years is 9 sfirot of light. Sfirot are dimensions of reality. So some of what they're talking about is literal, and some of what they're talking is not. Malchut is not the sfirot of light. That's our reality. After 9 years, there's a different aspect. They're literally talking about it's not even about the physical subject in one aspect. So no, you're not allowed to rape children. It's absolutely forbidden.
Andrew, sorry to interrupt. You're Andrew Meyer, Andrew Tate here. Nice to meet you, sir. I don't think we've spoken before.
No, but you played my video game on your stream. Thank you for that. The Alex Jones game. Thank you for playing that.
Was that your game? Okay, fantastic. So I'm assuming you're Jewish. Like I said, I don't know anything, so I'm asking.
Yes, absolutely.
Would you agree that Israel seems to get a free pass for things that other countries in the world would never get away with in a million years? I mean, imagine for a second, if you wouldn't mind, imagine Russian soldiers raping a Ukrainian prisoner of war on video. Do you think there'd be a huge media backlash? Do you think there'd be international condemnation? Do you think there'd be escalation of conflicts? Do you think there'd be a lot of things happening if that was, well, I mean, everyone saw it, right? Do you think Israel seems to get a free pass for a whole bunch of heinous crimes that no other country in the world seems to be able to get away with because the media always sides with them? Would you agree with that?
Yes and no. Yes, I think that Fox News, CNN, they cover up for a lot of the misdeeds, the mistreatment that Israel does. But at the same time, no, there's more attention on Israel than, for example, like the Uyghurs.
There's attention on Israel because of the free press and X and people, the Matrix breaking. The reason there's attention on Israel for the first time seriously in history is because the Matrix is broken because they control the Matrix. They control narratives. And the problem is the narrative's breaking to the point where they're trying to get TikTok banned because they can't lie anymore. So I'm just asking you as a Jew, do you agree that Israel seems to get a massive free pass for absolutely everything when any other nation state would face severe condemnation for even a half the acts?
Well, you asked me if any other nation would get a free pass. Like in China, they literally send men to rape the wives of the Uyghurs that are in the camps there. That's almost never discussed. So no, I don't think Israel's the only country getting a free pass for any kind of misdeeds.
Do we provide weapons to China and do we support them endlessly? I mean, do we give standing ovations when Xi comes over to Senate and Congress? Do we give them all their weapon systems? Do we call them our number one ally, or is China an alien? Well, I'm just trying to understand here. I mean, we're going to compare the two.
Yeah, Gavin Newsom literally cleaned up the streets of San Francisco for the first time ever because Xi was coming to San Francisco. We absolutely give them a free pass for sending fentanyl, killing hundreds of thousands with fentanyl. Give them a free pass. What was their punishment for sending us the Wuhan virus? What was their punishment for
Well,
absolutely
I don't know if they sent us the Wuhan virus, but it did originate over there. We're also not giving them hundreds of billions of dollars in foreign aid. We're not supporting them. We're not sending them all of our military grade weapons to, help in a genocide. I mean, I think our relationship with China is very different than our relationship with Israel.
We sent them all of our industry. All of our manufacturing is there now. They've decimated all of the Midwest.
Well,
All
that
of
wasn't a favor, though. I mean, they're doing manufacturing for a tenth of the cost that we are here. So it's not,
that's
and
not a
they.
benefit to Americans,
Well,
though. That's
okay, I
actually
just,
a big
I think
detriment to
I,
That's
Americans.
not
Sorry.
true. When we get goods produced for a tenth of the cost, that benefits us as well. That benefits our businesses.
And
So,
It's destroyed
just
American
quickly,
jobs.
I understand, Andrew, just quickly, because I just want to understand your point. What's the name of the Chinese lobby that donates to all of our politicians to make sure their interests are protected?
I don't know the name of it, but you could look at the spies that, what was it? Eric Swalwell had a spy. Dianne Feinstein had a Chinese spy. Like, these people are all surrounded by Chinese spies. To say that there's no lobby because I can't name it like I can name APAC, yeah, the Chinese are doing the same type of thing for sure.
Okay, I'm just going to say, though, I think we all know that we're talking about China right now, and we're not going to wake up tomorrow and have all of the headlines threatening to ruin our lives for speaking about China, or having people, call us anti-Chinese and saying that we should be canceled, or telling people that we should be kicked off of YouTube and things of that nature. So it's a very different relationship, and that's why they say that all the time, that Israel is our greatest ally and friend. And I do want to add Dave, because Dave Smith, I'm going to add, if you could just jump in here, because I think you've been kind of, and I kind of count you among these people, David Bacon and Jeffrey. It's very difficult for Jewish people especially to speak out without being called like a self-hating Jew, or basically saying, I just disagree, I find this to be immoral. And you have been under fire for a very long time. What do you make of this stranglehold that Israel seems to have on dialogue in America?
Oh, hey, well, thank you, Candace. Thanks for having me. What's up, everybody? Let me just say, first of all, I don't actually find it that difficult. I'm having a lot of fun. I enjoy all these names I get called. Look, I would just say to Andrew's point that he made a second ago, I mean, to even make the comparison between the U.S. relationship with China and the U.S. relationship with Israel just kind of shows how weak your hand here is. I mean, in the previous administration, in the last year of Donald Trump's administration, Mike Pompeo officially declared China guilty of a genocide. And he only cited one person, which was Adrian Zenz, who completely made up all his numbers. They're just all based off lies. And even he's admitted since that all these numbers were just wrong. It was like a straight up, like, he didn't carry the one type of thing, and said that the Uyghurs were like being reduced in their population in a way that nobody else was. And it was all completely wrong. Meanwhile, we're constantly bombarded with propaganda about how China's about to invade Taiwan, even though they've made no moves toward it. Israel, on the other hand, has been occupying Gaza and the West Bank since 1967. And not only do we not have secretaries of state calling them guilty of genocide, while the International Court of Justice has said it is a plausible genocide, but in fact, we're forced to fund and arm the thing. So I just don't see any comparison. I think that, as John Mearsheimer said, the relationship between the U.S. and Israel is unlike any other relationship in human history, in that they get unconditional support from us. And even when, say, they're causing domestic political problems for, say, the Biden administration, and they want to get them to stop, and they don't, they still have to keep supporting them. Look, every single president of my lifetime since Jimmy Carter has wanted a two-state solution. Every single one of them. The president of the country that is supporting and propping up Israel can't get them to do what they want. And even when they wag the middle finger at us, you have Benjamin Netanyahu on tape bragging about how he tricked Bill Clinton, and they still continue to receive all of this aid. So, I mean, I'm open to examples, but China certainly isn't it. What other relationship is anything like this one?
That's such a funny example you gave, Bill Clinton. The Clintons literally gave military secrets to the Chinese. So you're giving an example that is perfect for what I'm saying. The Chinese are allowed to get our military secrets through the Clintons, through other politicians. There's no penalty for them. We're letting them import whatever they want. The tariffs are basically nothing. They've destroyed American manufacturing, destroyed American jobs. They send us deadly fentanyl that's killed way more Americans than anything happening in the Middle East right now. By the way, I don't support giving aid to Israel. I don't support foreign aid for any nation. But to say that China it's a totally different situation. Sure, we're not giving them aid, but we're giving them a free pass to destroy our economy and dump all of their cheap slave-made goods here.
A couple things on that. Number one, China didn't destroy our economy or steal our manufacturing. Our government destroyed our economy and exported our manufacturing to them. And sure, I'm not saying that like no government secrets have ever been obtained by the Chinese. They're a serious force and they've done some things that I wouldn't support either. But again, the posture militarily is in conflict with the Chinese. This has been true since the Obama administration, through the Trump and the Biden administration. We're threatening them about them theoretically invading Taiwan. We're not proclaiming that we will support them in doing it, so it's kind of a different thing.
Yeah, China is our enemy, effectively, the way we speak about them, certainly. And we don't want to make enemies of anybody because they're a superpower and in many ways they're more powerful than the United States. But they're seen as an enemy. And we've exported our manufacturing globally. It's not just to China. That's a mistake of Western politicians to remove our manufacturing base. I think we have to be very careful when we're discussing this to avoid conflation and just constantly saying China, China, China. What I want to know is why our number one ally, as they're so called, can commit terrorist attacks on our soldiers and our troops, and how come we can't get them to agree with us militarily with anything? As Dave just quite rightly pointed out, the president of the United States of America doesn't seem to get our number one ally to agree on anything. We fund their genocides, and they seem to get away with whatever they want. They're giving absolute favor in the media endlessly, regardless of how many heinous acts they commit. And to say China, I mean, that's great, but we're talking about Israel here, and I think that's a conflation and it's a shield. My question was, sir, and I'm asking respectfully because I don't know you, Andrew. It's just a genuine question. Do you think that there would be a much larger uproar if Russian soldiers were seen raping a Palestinian on video camera who was a prisoner of war? Do you think there would be massive uproar from the West to talk about human rights, rights of prisoners of war, how this is a complete break of the Geneva Convention? Don't you think there'd be much more of an uproar than a few Twitter videos and the mainstream media basically not mentioning it at all? That's the question.
No, 100%. 100%. If they caught Russia doing that, that'd be the biggest story all over the place. I do think that all of what's happening here should be directed at something that could be a real change. Like, Netanyahu is already dangerously unpopular in Israel. Like, there's thousands and thousands of people protesting. It's very obvious that October 7th was allowed to happen. There's no way they didn't know that paragliders were coming in. And I think if more people focused on Netanyahu, for example, he's the actual leader, instead of just nebulously saying, everyone there is bad. America was in all of these unjust wars, Afghanistan, Iraq. We shouldn't have been there. What Israel's doing there is wrong. What we should be doing, instead of just condemning the nation, condemn the leadership.
Why were we in all those wars? Why were we in all those wars? Let's talk about that for a second. I mean, why did we go invade Iraq? Because Netanyahu testified in front of Congress that they had weapons of mass destruction. We're continuously fighting Israel's wars. We're not fighting China's wars.
I don't agree that they're just Israel's wars. They're also the neocon wars. Bush, Cheney, Halliburton made how many billions from Afghanistan and Iraq? So,
yeah, but Andrew, who are the neocons?
Yeah, who are the neocons is a great question, Dave, and I think you are definitely suited to answer that question.
Well, look, I mean, you can go, everybody can read it for themselves. If you want to say that wasn't just Israel, it was the neocons, and I highly recommend this. I was just mentioning this on Candace's show the other day, but go read A Clean Break, A New Strategy for Securing the Realm by Richard Pearl and David Wormser. It was a letter to Benjamin Netanyahu in 1996. The neocons' plan since way before 9/11 was to topple Iraq, ultimately to move toward toppling Iran, and also that they could have a clean break. And the break was from the peace process with the Palestinians, so that they wouldn't ever have to give the Palestinians their own state. Now, I wouldn't go as far as to say it is the only reason why we've fought all these wars is Israel, but it is undeniably a huge part of that equation. And so, look, I appreciate that you're being somewhat reasonable on this, but Benjamin Netanyahu really can't be completely removed from the rest of Israel. He's their longest serving prime minister in the country's history. And so if you're going to say they allowed October 7th to happen, well, okay, so like all these statements are just question begging statements. Who are the neocons? Why did they allow October 7th to happen if that's what you believe? Well, clearly it's so that they could then fight this war, this horrific war where like babies are just dying and starving to death by the tens of thousands, and yet I'm forced through my tax dollars to pay for all of this. So if you're against all of those things, I mean, isn't just the logical conclusion of that to question this relationship between the United States of Israel? It's not good for the United States of America. I don't think it's good for the people of Israel, to be frankly honest. And obviously, it's just horrific in its outcome.
Yeah, and I think that's part of it is like the psychological terrorism, and I can speak to this. There are all of these conversations being had by conservative commentators. I can tell you right now, conservative commentators, generally speaking, are anti-Israel, but they're all too afraid to say it because they understand what repercussions come with it. I mean, they're watching what's happened to me. They're watching what's happened to other people. This is what I say is just simply not normal, and it also should be completely unacceptable that people have to choose between basically just morality, basic morality. Like we're watching kids, their heads are being blown up, like we're literally watching mothers cry and scream and hold their newborns all over our X feed. And I do want to shout out, we wouldn't even have been able to see that if it wasn't for Elon freeing the bird. And yet they won't comment on it, and they choose this sort of undignified silence.
Well, Candace,
they're fearful that their lives are going to be ruined.
Well, Candace, what there is there's endless justification. I remember on October 7th, I think it was October 8th or 9th, I was arguing with Piers Morgan, and I said it's a genocide quite quickly afterwards, and that was during all of the hailstorm of justifications. We were beheaded babies and rapes and all this garbage, which turned out not to be true. And here we are nearly a year later, and they're still trying to justify thousands of murders a day. I mean, the videos haven't stopped coming out. The endless justifications they keep trying to pull out of their ass. But it's not 2 days after October 7th anymore. It's nearly a full year, and they're still committing a genocide. It's almost undeniable at this stage that it's a genocide. And I don't know how any person with a conscience, irregardless of their religious beliefs, can view these things and feel like this is justified in any manner. I mean, I only compare it to Russia-Ukraine because it's the next active conflict, right? But imagine Russia was doing this to Ukrainian people and children and babies. Imagine the outroar. It'd be nuclear war by now. We simply wouldn't let it happen. And we're standing by and providing the weapons for this to happen. And I think we need to have a conversation about why that really is. And for us to sit and believe that it's just some big coincidence and an accident and there isn't some kind of deal for this unconditional support that allows them to break every single international law is asinine. I think it's pretty clear to anybody with a brain who's never even read the Talmud or even read the history of Israel. You can just sit and understand that there's something going on here which is nefarious and strange.
Right. And I think part of it is, for me, I was trying to claw back into history and actually read books, because what's ironic is it was their demand, the neocons, people demanding after October 7th that everybody have an opinion on this issue. And I think what happened is people didn't realize they didn't really know much other than like the talking points, which, by the way, I used to say, like, Israel's our ally and friend. Like, there's just the things that you say when you're in politics. And then when you start to look into the history, you're like, wait a second, I have a lot of questions here. Like, I don't understand why this is happening. Or notoriously, Charlie Kirk asked a very basic question, which, Andrew Meyer, you brought up. Israel's the size of New Jersey. Like, how did this happen in like the most secure place in the Middle East? And they instantly started trying to smear him as anti-Semitic. Still to this day, he couldn't have been falling over himself more to appease his Zionist crowd. But that quickly, there's this like quick yoke, which is like, hey, you better not say anything, and this implicit threat, or we will ruin you. We will take you down. And earlier I saw like Laura Loomer tweeted, like, I've known Laura Loomer, I've never had any issues with her, but she, subtweeted me and said that people that, took money from the past from Jews now saying vile things. I've invited her to this space. What specifically am I saying that you deem to be vile? Like, what explicitly sounds to you like something that is vile? Why is there this idea that if you take money, or if you've ever been funny, you can accept $1 from a Jewish person, or even if you accept way more from a Jewish person, that means that you have to turn the other cheek, which is what she's implying, turn the other cheek when children are being ruthlessly murdered. I mean, that just doesn't make any sense to me.
Isn't the admission there so phenomenal? Like, I saw that tweet and it's just kind of like, oh yeah, well look, we throw all this money at young conservatives, and how dare you ever criticize us after that? Like, what the implication is that they own you forever or something like that? And like, look, particularly, and this is my whole thing that I've been trying to really convince like conservatives and kind of like Donald Trump supporter types about, is that it's like, look, if your whole thing is being America first, well then okay, but Benjamin Netanyahu, as was alluded to earlier by Dan, I think, when he came in and testified in 2002 in front of our Congress as a regional expert and testified that if we overthrew Saddam Hussein, the positive reverberations would be felt throughout the Muslim world and it would put all this pressure on Iran and all of this. And he also advocated that we topple the Iranian government and the government in Libya. And like, okay, if you're an America firster, well, how do you square that circle then? Then this guy is on the other team. Anybody who's advocating that America fight more stupid, catastrophic wars in the Middle East is not your ally.
Yeah.
So, Andrew, I got a question for you, Andrew Meyer, because, like I said, I'm very interested and I'm being inquisitive and open-minded. So, if you don't mind, is there any other country in the world that we can criticize where we will face this type of backlash from the media, backlash from the banking institutions, backlash from the matrix as a whole, mass cancellation, smear campaigns? Is there any other country on the planet that we can sit and have an open conversation about and ask questions about where we're going to face condemnation and genuine detriment and damage to our everyday lives? Is there any other country you can think of where we can't ask a single question about them?
I can't think of a question, but I know that if you talk about Muslim rapists in the UK or in Germany, you'll get arrested, even if you make a Facebook post. So it's to say that the only shibboleth in all of society is to speak about Israel, to speak about Jews. That's incorrect. I wanted to answer Dave's point earlier, too. Dave's, who are the neocons? Neocons are who I said. Bush, Cheney, Rumsfeld, Colin Powell, Condoleezza Rice. These are all Americans. I know they're obviously in partnership with Netanyahu, a lot of the Likud, but to say, oh, the neocons, it's all Israel, no, that was part of the American establishment. And obviously it was evil. I've been against that. If you don't know, I'm the don't tase me, bro. I question John Kerry for not trying to impeach Bush, for not trying to end these wars.
That's you? You're the
That's
don't tase
me,
bro?
Correct.
Very quickly, I just want to make a point here. That was a good answer to the question, saying that in the UK you can't highlight on the grooming gangs. That's true. The Jewish minister, the Jewish prime minister of the UK, who has a large contingent of his family being Jewish, has now made speech illegal. That's true. But I was asking primarily about nation states. Is there a nation state that we can't criticize? I mean, I can criticize the UK all day long. In fact, that's all I do. Is there any other nation state we can criticize?
No, I said to you, no, I don't know if there's another nation state, but it's not the only topic that you'll get canceled or locked in prison for discussing, and that's what I wanted to answer to.
You're trying to point it at the Muslims in the UK, but they're locking people up for Facebook comments. So to say that you can't criticize only Muslims in the UK is just, that's just bullshit, right?
I didn't say only. I said it was something else.
But
You'll get arrested
the Muslims,
for.
which is a very common, Zionist talking point. Is like, oh, it's the Muslims. And then, saying that, oh, well, you can't criticize Muslims in the UK, but that's just not true. In the UK, you can't criticize anything. They've taken away freedom of speech, and who did that? Jewish prime minister. So,
I'm sure you could criticize Christians all day in the UK and not go to prison.
So who's the enemy of Christianity, would you say, Andrew?
The enemy of Christianity is Satan, Satanists, people that hate God.
Candace knows a little bit about that. I'm looking for a reply.
Yeah, no, I agree, and that's why I've started speaking out about this stuff, and people are getting very upset with me. But the reality is when you have a circumstance where you have very powerful people, and I used the example yesterday, obviously, of the death of the horrific murder of Mary Fagan, someone like Leo Frank, who was a descendant of a movement that happened that was called Frankism, who commits an act and then which gives birth to the ADL. Right, the ADL was founded by protecting and defending a pedophile. They were, and I'm probably saying this wrong, B'nai B'rith. Leo Frank was the president of B'nai B'rith, unbelievably wealthy banking family, Cohn Loeb family. On her side, his wife's side, her last name was Selig, and on his side, that family had married into Rothschilds. I mean, to suggest that some black janitor got away with it, as the ADL has tried to do with updating history, is horrific. And to use the argument that it's anti-Semitism to notice that a girl got raped and killed is, to me, the synagogue of Satan, right? Like that, to me, right there. It's like pretending that you are Jewish, pretending that you're just this observant Jew who adheres to the Torah, when in reality you have done something that is so despicable and should be called out. I just cannot imagine what person in their sane mind would accept this narrative that you get to use, ironically, Jewish people as human shields. And like that's why when I bring up, the Sigmund Freud thing, the first victims were Jewish people to this ridiculous gaslighting that continues to go on, where essentially it's not, you're being told, I think they're trying to make Jewish people defend them, when in reality we have a form of Satanism that is manifest and has infiltrated all of the faiths, in my viewpoint.
This is why I love talking about this stuff and why I want to talk about it all the time. 100%, they're trying to throw all of Jews as a human shield in front of the evil of people like the Rothschilds or George Soros. And then they're creating a divide and conquer situation where they're separating people that actually love America or actually love God from their Christian brothers or from their Muslim brothers by pointing out here's this evil, but actually, if you criticize it, you're criticizing all Jews.
Yeah.
I've been against the ADL for forever because of that, and I appreciate the point you just hit on, Candace.
Thank you. Yeah.
Tristan Tate here.
Hey, Tristan.
I'm on Andrew's microphone, but Tristan Tate here. What do you think the solution is then to stop Jewish people from biting? I literally had an argument on Twitter an hour ago because I criticized the state of Israel. And this guy's a watch dealer who I had business with. I bought hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of watches for him. And he started insulting me, calling me an anti-Semite, calling me names, burnt the bridge, certainly in the business relationship. I think Candace and myself and Andrew have certainly grown out of the idea that when you criticize idiots like George Floyd, that we should all be offended as black or mixed race people. What do you think the solution is then to stop Jewish people biting so hard? Because I openly speak about how much I don't like the government of Israel, and I have Jewish friends. I sit around and drink and talk with them, the smart ones. But how do we stop them from biting and getting furious and calling you names when you are simply criticizing the actions of a government that you don't agree with?
Some amount of Jews are going to be tribal no matter what you do. But if all you truly want is peace and you want the bombing to stop, you want bad things to stop, all you have to say is, I want peace for the Israelis, I want peace for the Palestinians. Both sides need to stop their violence. You have to call it out on both sides. And obviously, it seems like the numbers, Israel's doing far more. But at the same time, the Palestinians, some of them did go and do the horrific things on October 7th. So it's neither side is blameless. Neither side is innocent. Both sides are doing war.
I disagree with that. You can't compare October 7th with what's happened after or before, to be honest. So I don't think it's like, oh, well, they both have blame, and so let's just wash it away. That's like the little brother that comes and kicks the big brother in the nuts and then goes back to the dad and says, oh, he attacked me, and then the big brother gets punished. Well, the dad is America, and the little brother is fucking Israel, and the big brother is Palestine, and that's what's going on.
It's not to say that they're equivalent in the number of deaths or they're equivalent in the number of deeds. The point is to say that both sides have done war, and to make both sides stop, you must call for peace. It's that simple. Mahatma Gandhi conquered the British Empire by calling for peace. If you call for peace, who can call you hateful?
They've called for peace. Israel doesn't want peace. They've never wanted peace. In fact, if they wanted peace, they would have stopped October 7th before it happened. They don't want peace. They want the fucking land. Just like every single time they go into the West Bank and take more land and more land and more land. And that's why they blew up the USS Liberty, because they wanted us to go fight another war for them. This isn't about, Israel just wants to exist and they want peace. It's fucking bullshit. They don't want peace. If they wanted peace, they wouldn't keep bombing innocent civilians for an entire year, like over something they could have stopped before it even started.
I'm not saying that Netanyahu wants peace. Obviously, they let those attacks happen so that they could do their massive bombing campaign. That's why they did it. My point is, Tristan asked, how do you get some of the Jews to stop biting back so hard, to call for peace? If you have the high ground in all of this is the call for peace. That's it. If all you're doing is calling for peace, you can't be. You could be unfairly called an anti-Semite, but if all you're doing is calling for peace and saying both sides must stop any type of violence and war, that's incredibly fair. Anyone to attack the idea of peace would then be unfair.
If the Islamic world, let's say, called for peace and decided to stop resisting the Zionist influence, would Israel still be attempting to expand in the West Bank and steal their land?
Probably, but I think that if you have,
how can you call for peace? How can you call for peace?
There's right now a massive PR campaign to show all of the atrocities happening in Palestine, and I'm not saying the atrocities aren't happening. My point is all of the resources are pointed at, here are all of the atrocities. Zero resources are being used to say, this is our plan for peace. This is the peace that we want. We want peace between all of these nations. Nobody's calling for it. If all of the Islamic states were using their resources to do that, PR and the narrative, there's a reason that Israel puts so much effort into it. If you're calling for peace at that level, it can influence U.S. policy. It can change things. Calling for peace is, and actually wanting it, is the way.
Can we agree that it's primarily Israel that controls the mainstream media narrative, at least? Can you show me an example of them calling for peace and a promise not to expand deeper into the West Bank?
Neither side is calling for peace. I'm not saying that Netanyahu is a peaceful man. Netanyahu's a warmonger. I think that he had played a part in 9/11. Okay, I don't think he's a good guy. I'm saying
It's not just Netanyahu though. They're literally stealing land in the West Bank as we speak on this space right now. They're setting fire to the West Bank. They're stealing land. They're killing people over there, and that's not Netanyahu. That's the Israelis doing that because they have free reign. It's very similar to that Stanford experiment. You ever hear about the Stanford experiment where they
I almost put that in
yeah.
my book until I found out that it's actually fake. It didn't happen like that. But your example, though, to say, well, look, there's everyday Israelis that are hateful and they're doing that. That's true. And when I gave the example, America was in all these unjust wars. It wasn't just, okay, the neocons, meaning Israel, is behind it. Plenty of Americans were for those wars. They went and did all kinds of atrocities. I don't then say America is evil, Americans are evil. You have to condemn the individual acts and the individual behavior. You can't blanket just say all these people are bad. That'll never lead to an improvement of the situation. You have to give people an incentive for peace. You have to say, let's have peace, and you have to acknowledge that both sides can improve their behavior.
Yeah, but
The
Andrew,
Israelis
look, I
have
think
never wanted peace, and that's why we're in this situation. Like, they've been killing Palestinians, they've been operating two sets of justice. I mean, you can't say, oh, they just want peace, they just, we want peace, whatever, when they're operating apartheid. Like, the Palestinians were just welcoming them in initially, and now they, displaced a ton of them. They're, killing them. They're operating two sets of justice. Like, if you were a Palestinian, just put yourself in their shoes. Somebody invades your land. They're kicking you out of your homes. You have no justice. If an Israeli does something to you, there's no recourse. If you do something to an Israeli, you get killed. Like, that's not a situation that anybody's going to be happy with. And on top
That's
of
an
it,
extreme. That's an extreme telling of the situation.
Wait,
That's
one
not
second.
exactly correct.
I just want Dave Smith to jump in here because I think regarding the peace stuff, he has kind of illustrated some very important, things that people should know about that process, because I don't think it is achievable based on what Bibi Netanyahu and his cabinet have said. Dave, do you want to illustrate?
Yeah, sure. So look, I mean, I think Andrew, and I appreciate you for. I think you're being fairly reasonable on this, and it's kind of a little bit like 4 or 5 on 1 here. But I think the question becomes, if you're going to say, look, it's strictly speaking, you're absolutely right. If you say horrible things have been done by Arabs to Jews and horrible things have been done by Jews to Arabs, but the obvious asymmetry here that I think Dan is getting at is that Israel has totally dominated the Palestinians since at least 1967. Even forget the creation of Israel and the ethnic cleansing campaigns and all of that. But since then, they have totally dominated the Palestinian people. They are ruled by a foreign military. And so if you're going to say call for peace, okay, that's kind of abstract. What exactly does peace mean? And what peace means is a Palestinian independent state. And there have been multiple time periods where Palestinian leaders and other Arab leaders have been pushing for that. In fact, still to this day, the Saudis are pushing for that. And so if we're going to actually call for peace, well, here's what it's going to look like. America, stop funding Israel. That's all that really needs to happen here. I mean, Israel could not be conducting the war on Gaza right now without U.S. support, let alone talking about taking on Hezbollah and the Houthis and the Iranians. I mean, please. All that needs to happen here is that America needs to stop intervening in parts of the world where we have no business. Israel will have no choice but to come to some sort of deal with their neighbors there. So again, we should all be for peace. I completely agree with you. But what peace looks like isn't the Palestinians being in subjugation forever. Peace looks like the Israelis having to accept, and by the way, all that we're asking really here is that they accept the 78% that they got pretty illegitimately and leave the Palestinians with the 22% of the land that is rightfully theirs. There is no dispute over whether Gaza and the West Bank belong to Israel or not. They simply don't, and the Israelis have no right to dominate them.
What percentage of the population in Israel would you say agree with this war, would you think, Andrew? Because my brother's point about Jews getting extremely angry when you highlight some of the problems with the Israeli government, I can only speak from personal experience, but when I speak, I mean, and also to give you credit, Andrew, you've been very reasonable, as Dave said, and it does feel like we're all ganging up on you, but it's a very interesting conversation. You've been very reasonable. You've been more reasonable.
He's the only one of these Zionist accounts that like rose their hand and said that I want to also say that I did not intend for this. I literally said I want other Zionists to join. I mean, like I said, I was out to Laura Loomer. If I don't see any Zionists here, they all have, the Star of David in their profiles, and I'm looking through trying to get them to add here. They like to sort of yap a lot and call everything anti-Semitic, but when it comes down to debating, I've just found that it's like it is a struggle to get Zionists to defend their positions. It's a struggle.
Well, Andrew's done a fantastic job because he's been reasonable, and I don't agree with everything he said. But the reason that most of them won't turn up is because, truthfully, they believe you should just kill all the Palestinians and take all the land, and they don't want to say it outright. But that's the truth of it. And the fact is that when you speak to Israelis, certainly from personal experience, every single one of them seems to believe this war is justified and it's fine. So, I mean, this couldn't be happening without a huge contingent of the Israeli population on side. Would you agree? I mean, we talk about the odd protest. That's nice. But what percentage of Israel do you think actually agree with these actions? Because I recently saw there was a big debate on a television show in Israel as to whether it's okay to rape prisoners. And it turns out the crowd agreed. I think it was 64%, that that's fine. So, I mean, do you agree that via propaganda or via tribalism, whatever it is, that there's a huge contingent of the Israeli population that just want to kill all the Palestinians and get them out the way?
No, I think there obviously is a large percentage that want that. I don't think that it's near 100 like you seem to be framing it. And the poll that you just cited saying 64% allowed to rape, that was fake. That was they were polling something else, and then people took that and said that they should be allowed to rape. So that wasn't real. But as to
what was the number then?
No.
What was the number?
The poll wasn't about that. It was about something else. I couldn't tell you what it was about. So whatever the number was, it's not relevant to what you're talking about. That wasn't
they were
the poll.
rioting about it.
No, but that wasn't. They weren't. The poll on their television wasn't should they be allowed to rape, though. And you're talking about a minuscule amount of people rioting for should they be allowed to rape. Much more people were rioting against Netanyahu because people know that he let this happen. So, and your question was, how do you move forward from all of this? There's been, I think Dave Smith was saying, there's been peace attempts in the past. Nothing happened. All we have to do is get America out of the way. If that's true, we have on the ballot right now the most populist president in our lifetimes, Donald Trump, who has said openly that Abbas wanted peace and Netanyahu wasn't interested. So if the energy that all of this is generating is focused towards, okay, we're going to elect Trump, but he must create a peace process. He must demand peace, and he won't go to bat for war. He won't go to bat in Iran. He won't do any of these wars. If that's the next presidency that we have, we may very well have a peace process. We may be closer to peace than at any point in history of this conflict. And
he was literally just talking about on TV how Israel isn't big enough.
Yeah, he's paid by Miriam.
Just talking about how Israel should expand.
He's paid by Miriam Adelson. He has to continue saying things that are supportive of what she wants to keep getting her money. But you saw his last administration. All he did was move an embassy. There was no expansionist war out of Israel like there is now under Biden. Like Jake Shields, who I debated him before. He's been saying, why should we vote for Trump? Under Trump, was Netanyahu doing all of this bombing? No. It was far more peaceful than it is now. Not to say there was peace, but it was far more peaceful. And with Trump in his next administration, there's a much greater chance for peace than there is under another Democrat administration. Look what's happening now. All of the expansion of war.
Well, do you agree that I've been here to speak about, because we're talking about presidents, and I think it's important to also bring up where a lot of this fear is coming from. And obviously, it's the fact that when things happen on our soil and we find out that there is potentially Israeli involvement, we are basically hushed up, called crazy. There have been a lot of incidents. First and foremost, the USS Liberty. It's stunning to me that they were able to jam through Congress on October 7th at every student in America must learn about this horrific, tragic event. Why would you have to learn about a tragic event that didn't happen in your country? That makes very little sense to me when you're not allowed to learn about the USS Liberty. An act of tremendous cowardice, Dave. I mean, when you and I first spoke and you were kind of going at the left and the right, I very much felt that you delivered solid points on this, that the cowardice exists on both sides. And the USS Liberty, I think, is a litmus test for that. But then you have the case of JFK. I mean, we know that Donald Trump saw those files and he said he was going to release them to the public and then didn't release them to the public. And then they did this weird thing where they pretended to release some of it to the public and said that it was Russia. Well, it's always Russia for some reason. Obviously, no one believes that. If Russia had shot a sitting president as loved as JFK was in broad daylight, we would have gone to war with them, and we didn't, especially in '63. And then you have the case like 9/11 and what we know about 9/11, factually speaking, about the person that was running Audigo, the vice president of ODIGO, I hope I'm saying that right, the Israeli company, who said that they had received a warning ahead of time on that day to clear their offices. And that's why it feels like this nation is occupied, because we have all of these, facts that are existing, and we can't talk about them, and we can't talk about why the guy who said he didn't shoot JFK, Lee Harvey Oswald, then was MK Ultra by Jack Rubenstein. And that is why I think there is all of this fear, is because when you look into history and you see what Israel has been potentially involved in, and we're not even allowed to discuss those facts that we have, it's quite terrifying to a lot of people.
That's right. Considering what a large cultural event 9/11 was, I would argue if the dancing Israelis were dancing something else, not only would there be military consequences, but there'd certainly be media consequences. It'd certainly be an open conversation. It wouldn't be memory hold. So it's extremely interesting that the dancing Israelis vanish. If it was dancing Chinese, I think it'd be a very different scenario. Another thing I want to say about peace is it's a great buzzword, but peace is often a derivative of justice. And if you expect people, full-grown men, to live in an unjust situation forever and watch their children die and get blown to pieces, I think any red-blooded male understands that that's not going to happen for very long. So to sit and say peace, but also advocate for mass injustice is an oxymoron and a logic fail. My question for you, Andrew, if you don't mind, because I have many, can you name one way that the U.S. tangibly benefits from keeping Israel as an extremely expensive ally? Because we already have military bases all across the Middle East. I mean, so that whole military base it's an aircraft carrier on land garbage doesn't float because planes have enough range to fly from Jordan or Saudi or anywhere else. So what tangible benefits does the American state, and by extension the typical people, the taxpayers of the USA, get by keeping Israel as its most expensive ally?
I said earlier on this space, I'm against all foreign aid. I don't want foreign aid for any nation. But
so
to your point that there can be no peace without justice, there must first be peace. To talk about any type of reparation or what should be done in the other's favor, the first thing has to be a call for peace. If you don't have both sides sitting at the table, honestly looking to see what can be done for the other side, there will never be any justice nor any peace. There must be peace. The call for peace must be primary, and that's what's missing in this conversation, is that people, you have to recognize a lot of the Israelis don't want peace. A lot of the Palestinians don't want peace. Both sides have to want peace. If that's their primary objective, a solution can be found. If both sides really just want to dominate the other, there will never be peace.
I mean, I disagree. I think we should be at war with Israel. I think we should have been at war with Israel when they, blew up our warship and in hopes of pretending that it was somebody else so that we would go fight another war. When they did the Levin affair and we caught them literally trying to blow up schools and theaters to blame it on somebody else. When somebody's committing terrorist attacks directly against U.S. citizens in hopes of blaming it on somebody else, like that immediately should have been an act of war, and we should no longer have been an ally with that.
What do you think about that?
I mean, should we go to war with
Andrew, give me 1 second. I want to bring in Dave Smith on the topic of the USS Liberty.
Well, I mean, yeah, look, it's pretty clear what happened there. So I don't know what, listen, I'm not going to go as far as Dan. I don't think we should go to war with Israel. I mean, I'm trying to get America out of the war business as much as I can.
If any other country had blown up a U.S. warship, napalmed the decks, shot, the rescue boats, and then tried to torpedo it, we would be at fucking war with that country unequivocally.
Well, that's actually. But when you put it like that.
sorry, Tristan Tate jumping in here. That's actually literally the reason that we went to war in Vietnam. But that was a false flag. It didn't actually happen, but it was a false attack on the
You're
U.S.
talking about something 50 years ago that we should go to war for something that happened 50 years ago. That's crazy.
Andrew,
No,
one
but
second,
listen,
guys. One second.
from a guy that
I
was in the
get some control
military,
here.
from somebody that was in the military, and I understand how it's not just like some fighter pilot went rogue and said, "Oh, let's go blow up this ship." These orders come down from the top, and so for that country to say, "Hey, we are going to knowingly blow up a U.S. warship to blame it on this other country so that they will go to war for us," I mean, that shows you how much respect they have for us. Whether we go to war with them or not, we absolutely, unequivocally never should have been fucking allies with
Well,
these people.
look.
But
I
you're
really
talking
don't give a
about
shit
going to
about
war with
us.
them now. I heard
Well,
you
hold on, but
say
Andrew.
we should go to war with them
Okay,
over something that happened 50 years ago. That's
guys, I'm just
insane.
gonna
No,
direct. I'm gonna let everybody
We
say what they
we
want.
should have been at war with
Guys,
them back then. We should have gone to war with them when they committed the Levin affair. We should have gone to war with them numerous times. We've had numerous reasons. When they shot down a civilian airliner, I mean, all these things were acts of war when other people did it. When Russia shot down a civilian airliner,
wait,
that
who
was an
shot
act of
down a
war. Why isn't it
civilian
an act of
airliner?
Israel, when it flew over Israeli airspace, they shot down a civilian airliner. Nothing
If
happened.
you're going to
Nobody
talk
gave a
about something
shit.
from 50 years ago and say we should go to war with them now, that's not productive and it's
The whole
insane.
Palestine debate, they're talking about something that's happened thousands of years ago. So I just think that,
Yeah, my point to all of that is both sides need to stop their push for war, whatever their cause. If it's the Israelis saying the 1929
guys, I just want
Hebron
to
massacre.
direct the conversation. So, Dan, I would like you to just finish your thought process about the airline and then speak, I guess, for people that are not aware of what happened on the USS Liberty, which is basically everybody, because you actually don't learn about it in school, and I was shocked to learn about it in my adult life. Can you illustrate what exactly happened on the USS Liberty? And then I would like to cut to Dave Smith so he can give his response to that, and then Andrew will come back to you. So, Dan, USS Liberty, go.
Yeah, we had a naval intelligence warship, and they decided to start doing strafing runs. They were shooting it. They had multiple fighter jets shooting it, dropping napalm on the decks. They're shooting the lifeboats. I mean, all these things are like, not only the acts of war, but they're war crimes. You can't shoot the lifeboats. You're not supposed to napalm the decks. And then they had another, boat come in and try and torpedo it too. And then they were going to bring in a helicopter. So it's like, and there was no chance that, we didn't know that it was a fucking U.S. warship. They had multiple assets attacking this all over like an hour and a half period of time. So it wasn't an accident. That was all bullshit. So they intentionally tried to, and they did kill U.S. Navy soldiers. And then they got, and then the remaining ones that weren't killed all got a gag order. I mean, it's just like, how the fuck does that even happen?
And it is true. And they came in with unmarked planes because they wanted to be able to blame it on Egypt to drag Americans into war with Egypt, which brings in the concept of a false flag attack, which we know before JFK got shot, the CIA came to him with a plan. Operation Northwoods, for those of you that are not available or not aware of this, look up Operation Northwoods, where they said, hey, we want to go to war with Cuba, so we want to stage a terrorist attack on American soil. And they kicked around some ideas like maybe we'll do it in Miami, maybe we'll do it in New York, maybe we'll down an airliner, maybe we'll attack a warship. And so when you fast forward and you realize JFK got shot, and then years later people are saying that 9/11 was a staged terrorist attack, and then we know for a fact that yes, Israel did do the USS Liberty as a staged terrorist attack and then swept it under the rug. These are huge problems. So don't think that these are conspiracies. When people start asking questions about false flag attacks, there have been successful false flag attacks that have dragged us into war, and there have been unsuccessful ones that have dragged us into watching a president get shot in broad daylight because he wouldn't say okay to it. JFK said, I'm absolutely not doing that. You're demented, and we should scatter the CIA into the wind. And so they instead scattered him into the wind, allegedly. Dave, I would like you to.
I mean, these are the ones that we caught them on, by the way, too. In the Levin affair, when they're going to blow up, British and American civilians, and then blame it on guess who? The Muslim Brotherhood. So it's like when you have a country. I mean, listen, just to do false flag attacks, think about how nefarious you have to be. It's one thing to declare war on somebody. It's another thing to kill your own allies in hopes of blaming it on your enemies, so then your allies will go to war with them. That's the most fucked up thing you possibly could do. And they've been caught on numerous occasions doing it. Right? And yet, if you even suggest that they knew about 9/11, it's like, conspiracy theory tin hat. It's like, how many times you have to be caught? And the Israelis aren't fucking idiots. Like, think about how many times they've probably gotten away with this.
And there was a Mossad agent who actually wrote a book about that. I think it was called "By Deception Only." I'll Google it. But Dave Smith, I'd like you to jump in now while I look that up.
Sure. Sure. So just well, a couple quick things on both of those topics. So like for people who just aren't familiar, like Operation Northwood is declassified, so you can go read about that yourself. And Candace is 100% right in her description of it. It really is that crazy. And just on the topic of the USS Liberty, just my boy Scott Horton, who is a genius. He's been the managing editor for antiwar.com for like 25 years. He had a long, I think it was like an over 3 hour interview with three of the surviving members of that ship. And so I would just encourage people to go check that out because
Can
it
you
really
say that
is.
name again so I can write it down?
It's a It was on the Scott Horton show. I'd have to, but if you look up Scott Horton show USS Liberty, you can
Okay.
probably find it pretty easily. But it is really exactly as Dan describes it. It was really that bad. And look, I would add two quick things because I got to run actually in a second here. But two quick things. Number one, that to not go back 50 years ago or to not go back in ancient history, just as I mentioned before, the current sitting prime minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, is on tape bragging about how he tricked Bill Clinton in the Oslo Accord negotiations, that he tricked him out of having to fulfill what the Americans have been demanding of the Israelis, this country that we're propping up. And that alone is more than enough justification to say that they should not be our allies anymore. One other quick point that I just want to make is that because it gets brought up a lot that, blame gets pinned on the Muslims or that we kind of have these common enemies with Israel. It's one really interesting note of history is that the Muslim world did not hate Americans before that we started siding with Israel. And this is a huge part of why we have to deal with the terrorism problem and the hatred in this region. After World War I, we set up the King Crane Commission to go through and figure out what we were going to do with a lot of these countries who had been ruled by the Ottoman Empire, which no longer existed. And you can read it for yourself. In the King Crane Commission, they went to Syria and they interviewed thousands and thousands of regular Syrian people, and they asked them who they wanted to rule Syria in a League of Nations mandate. And they overwhelmingly picked the United States of America because we were seen as the good guys. The French and the English were seen as the colonizing forces. They were the bad guys who had come through there and been ripping them off and holding them down for years. But we were viewed as the people who were about freedom, the city on a hill. Because we've chosen to prop up Israel for all these years, it's not just the cost and the $3 billion a year or the substantially more that we've given them over the last year. The cost is also that we engender hatred across the entire Muslim world. None of these nations pose any legitimate threat to us. To say, oh, well, we should just sit back and vote for Donald Trump. I don't know about you guys. I watched the Republican National Convention. The whole thing was praising Israel and talking about war with Iran. I'm not exactly getting inspired to support that. So anyway, I do have to run, but thanks to all you guys. Thank you, Candace, for having me. I really appreciate the spirited conversation. And thanks to you, Andrew, for, I think, being the most reasonable Zionist I've ever talked to. Appreciate it.
I agree, Andrew. I think you've been incredibly reasonable. And again, I just want to commend you and note that I have tried to get on all of these loudmouth Zionists who love to call everyone insane, but they actually, I think, harbor a lot of insane opinions themselves, and they can't join me. Whereas Gad Saad, who, by the way, I think wrote a book saying that he was in the Mossad or that he was working for the Mossad and had received instructions, and that is the problem, is that it's very clear to me that there does seem to be some sort of a Mossad operation running in the American public, and that has infiltrated our mainstream media. And look no further than the fact that the New York Post, which writes extensively in support of Israel, when you actually hit some of the bios on their journalists, it says that they served in the IDF. I mean, how can you purport that you're engaging in unbiased journalism and then you're going after people? Any person that says something reasonable, like innocent children, should not be killed. The people should not be growing up in the circumstances, these children that they are growing up in Gaza, and then have the audacity to pretend that those of us who are recognizing that murdering children is wrong, innocent children is completely wrong, calling all of us crazy, calling all of us unhinged. Like, this is actually an unhinged perspective to have, that you can just kill every last Palestinian so that Bibi Netanyahu can get what he wants. I actually wasn't familiar with that, the downed liner that you were talking about, Dan. So thanks for interjecting that. Andrew, in regards to the USS Liberty, in regards to Operation Northwoods, by the way, the name of the book that I brought up that was written by the person who was in the Mossad was called By Way of Deception. And he spoke about this, that they believe that their motto is that you can deceive and you can get what you want, and turning kind of nations against each other, but you're kind of like the hand that's orchestrating all of that. When you hear that and you hear all of this, Andrew, how does that make you feel as somebody who, believes in Zionism as a political philosophy?
Well, I agree. I agree with what you've been saying in that these are people that are co-opting all of Jewry, all of Judaism, and trying to make it their voice. Like Netanyahu, when he held up a Talmud, Netanyahu doesn't even keep Shabbat. You can go and look up what the Torah says about not keeping Shabbat and what the penalty is that for a Jew. So Netanyahu holding up the Talmud, he's insincere, and these psychos, these NWO freaks that want to co-opt all of Jews and hold us up as a human shield. That's why I'm doing this. I agree with your theory that these people are trying to speak for us, and they should not be allowed to speak for us. And I want to thank Dan for retracting his call for war, because what we need is peace. Peace is the only way forward. And when Dave Smith said earlier, the only thing at the RNC that was discussed was bombing Iran, I only saw that from J.D. Vance in a presser that he did with Hannity after a speech, and I was not for the J.D. Vance pick. I wanted Ben Carson, by the way. But the point being, Trump spoke about a lot of things that are pro-America. Dave Smith is totally... I was at the Libertarian Convention, by the way, third row for Trump. The Libertarians were saying... This is before Trump was shot at. The Libertarians were saying Trump should eat a bullet. So Dave Smith, Libertarian, they got to answer for theirs. If they really want peace, they should be supporting Trump. Trump, who said Abbas wanted peace and Netanyahu didn't. The only way forward is peace. People should be supporting Trump, but with the caveat that he must be for peace.
All right, Andrew, quick question, if you don't mind again. I have many. I'm sure as an intelligent nation state, and especially with the most advanced military weapons on the planet, the chance of an October 7th style attack happening again, let's argue that it happened somehow. They had a monumental failure of intelligence, which is, of course, impossible, but let's pretend it happened organically. The chance of it happening again must be near zero. So surely peace is just to stop blowing up the children, right? That's peace. What can the Palestinians do? They're going to get across the border again? Are they going to get more paragliders? Is that what we believe? Surely peace is just to stop blowing up the kids right now. Bam, done, if they want peace.
Correct.
And stop invading the West Bank as well, stealing.
That's right. So if they stop killing everybody and if they stop invading and taking people's land, then the peace comes, right? So surely the burden of peace is on the Israelis who are failing, correct?
And the only way we're going to get to that is, as I believe Dave Smith said, if we don't have American support for war, it will inevitably end in peace. So everybody listening to this can literally help create peace by supporting Trump, but with the premise he must be the pro-peace president that we elected in 2016. And I'm not Israeli, but I'll attempt to answer all of this stuff. I think that we absolutely have to look at Israel as a nation state dependent on us. We're giving them aid, we're giving them weapons. So if they're dependent on us, then it's up to us to create the peace. And the only way you're going to get that, call for peace, demand both sides start engaging in it, and look to who are possibly going to be the next president of the United States. Kamala Harris, part of the complete globalist cabal, total puppet. They want war. They want to divide and conquer all of us. Trump, who's an independent, literally was shot at. The CIA definitely involved. The Secret Service stood down. So that is a man that's for peace. And all of the people in the dissident right that's, I don't know if I'm going to vote. By the way, I hate Israel. If you hate Israel, why would you not vote for the only man that gives us a chance at peace? And that's one of the big reasons I like talking about this. We have a chance to create peace right now. And I think people are a little unfocused on how to get there.
Why don't you feel, or why do you think the AIPAC does not have to register with FARA?
I don't feel that at all. They should.
Okay, but why do you think that is? Because, I mean, a logical extension of the fact that AIPAC does not have to register with FARA, you can go to trackapac.com and see how every single senator on both sides of the dichotomy is taking money from Israel. Surely we're an occupied nation, and Israel is effectively running the American government currently. Would you agree?
I think they're one of many factions. People don't talk about the Qatar money. There's a whole great documentary called Blood Money by my friends John Dutoit and Scooter Downey.
Well, I know this very well. Qatar invests in infrastructure projects, and they try and use that political leverage to get what they want, because that's what investment is. Investment's not being a nice person. Investment is typically building infrastructure and then trying to lean on it politically. And every single nation in the world does that. But Qatar doesn't openly hand piles of cash to senators.
I don't know that that's true. I think you should watch the documentary Blood Money, and they're not the only ones, by the way. We are puppeted by people. Stop talking about the British like they have no influence. They literally sent a spy, Christopher Steele, to try and derail the Trump administration. So there's the British, there's the Chinese, there's Qatar. There's all number of players in this global NWO trying to puppet the America, steer us off course. Israel, there is an issue there, obviously, but to focus on them solely and not look at, okay, there's this wide range of issues. That's how we are getting divided and conquered. They use our momentum.
I understand your point.
What you're saying.
Sorry, go on, Dan.
I was just, what you're saying sounds great, like this whole peace thing and blah, blah, blah. And, it's also these guys, but we're not fighting wars for the UK. We're not fighting wars for Saudi. Like, if you look at how we are acting and who is controlling our country, it all points back to Israel. I mean, Epstein Island was not an accident. Like, him being killed was not an accident. Nobody being prosecuted wasn't an accident. Like, that was a Mossad operation, so they have dirt on our U.S. politicians. And because of that, because of this dirt, because of these bribes, because of the money that's coming in, they're controlling our government. And that is the source of the problem. Saying, we're going to tell Trump that we want peace and then Trump's going to have peace. It's just bullshit. I mean, it sounds great and whatever, but that's not the real world. The real world is these people are controlling our government, and that's not going to fucking stop by us telling Trump he needs to call.
And I'll say that that was the only government.
Sorry, to piggyback what Dan said, I think there's another very important point. You talk about a UK spy. Well, espionage is illegal. And you talk about Qatari blood money. Well, that's once again illegal. People went to jail for that. I think in the EU, they tried to bribe somebody with cash and people went to jail. The point we're making here is that AIPAC can do this with impunity, legal impunity, and they're the only people who can do it. So why is Israel allowed to bribe our politicians and own our government with legal impunity? And any other nation that attempts to do that at least will face consequences of the law. Why did Israel just buy us?
I don't agree they're the only ones allowed to do it without impunity. Fang Fang is a Chinese spy. We all know her name. No charges ever for anything like that. So just because you're saying that, AIPAC isn't forced to register, all of these countries are allowed to get away with all of this. There was no charges for Fang Fang, Christopher Steele, anything like that. And Dan's saying that can I finish one point? Come on! Let me finish one point. Dan Bilzerian saying that the only country we're going to war with is Israel. If you forget, the Taliban were destroying the opium in Afghanistan. We went to Afghanistan to protect the opium. That money got laundered through HSBC. That money goes straight to the UK and Britain. So if you think the only nation puppeting us for war is Israel, you're just not that deep into this. No offense.
I did also want to speak about the blanket statement when people say Israel's the most moral army in the world, because that's another one that I'm just trying to comprehend why people started saying that. Back in 2002, I believe it was, the Israeli troops decided to take over Palestinian TV stations and start playing pornography as a weapon of war. And when you consider that as being used as a weapon of war, and then we look over here, and this is something that people talk about a lot, of the introduction of pornography into American society, and please correct me, Andrew, if I'm wrong, is pornography still banned in Israel? Do they eventually ban pornography?
I have no idea. That's a good question.
Okay, I'm not positive on that. But some of these issues, then you talk about blackmail, pornography, and we know for a fact that there have been tons of blackmail things that have taken place, whether they involved the Mossad, and of course talking about Jeffrey Epstein, we do know the Mossad was involved in that, and there's absolutely no accountability. Do you think the reason for that is because Israel has secured through mechanisms of blackmail a stranglehold on all the people that are in office today? And by the way, I believe that there are some commentators who, and somebody like Destiny who's popped up here, which is, I won't have him on because I don't think it's fair to the Zionist lobby to have on a sexual deviant as a representative. But I will say that, I believe that they have, they're capturing blackmail on people by seeing what weird pornography they scroll to. Destiny's got some weird stuff out there. And then are able to control these voices and say, like, we know that you scrolled onto this website. We know that you're into kitty stuff, whatever it is. Is that a far out theory, given everything that we know about Israel? That could be a reason why so many politicians are responding in that way.
I think that makes a lot of sense. If you look at Alex Acosta, he was the prosecutor in South Florida when charges were brought against Epstein. He was literally the dean at my law school, by the way, Acosta. And he said he was told by federal agents, like, Epstein is an intelligence asset. You have to lay off of him. And I think all of the research points to that Epstein was a joint operation between the CIA and the Mossad. So I think, yeah, they do have a lot of blackmail on a lot of people. That makes absolute sense.
Yeah.
Andrew, another quick question, because you talked about British spies and these kind of things. I'm a dual citizen, American, British national, so this is just popped into my head. If you're an American pedophile with a British passport, can you hide from the American government in England?
I have no idea.
No, you cannot.
No, you cannot is the answer. So,
but you can in Israel.
Why is an Israeli passport make you immune from extradition for any, especially sexual crimes committed in the West? Don't you think that's a bit strange?
Yeah, that's terrible. They should reverse that. You have to realize the Israeli nation state was founded by atheists. Like David Ben-Gurion is an atheist. He's an amoral guy. So anything like that, there's plenty Israel does wrong. Believe me, I would have them change it.
Okay, so let's remove religion for a second. Let's just talk about this logically. Let's remove religion from it for a second. So we're talking about a nation state where if you have the passport, you can hide from your crimes anywhere else in the world. If you're the leader of this nation, it doesn't matter what the International Court of Justice says about your arrest warrant. You can ignore that. You can openly bribe politicians, openly, and you're the only country who can ever do it. You're the only country who's ever attacked America and not felt repercussion. You're the only country that can't be criticized without the person having genuine detriment to their everyday life. You're the only country protected by the mainstream media endlessly. You're the only country that can commit genocide. You're the only country that can rape prisoners of war. Don't you think this is extremely unusual? And that there's certainly something going on behind the scenes that's not just a matter of, APAC, they try and bribe politicians, but so does China. Don't you think there's something else going on? Just using your logical mind.
Your assertion that they're the only nation to do many of those things is just completely false. The fact that fentanyl is something that people have to willingly ingest, it's still an attack on America to bring it through the border and kill Americans. That's their plan. And by the way,
you act like that's not coming from Mexico too, though.
Well, let me finish a point. I don't interrupt you guys. Let me finish a point, please.
Yeah, let's let him finish his point. Go ahead, Andrew.
The Wuhan virus, obviously, they suspended internal transportation in China. They were not allowed to go places in China, but they are allowed to come to America. And there's videos of Chinese nationals literally licking door handles, the sabotage at the meat factories. There's all sorts of things that China did that are an attack upon America. You saying that Israel's the only nation to ever do it, you're just ignoring something and saying blah, blah, China. It's not blah, blah to send fentanyl and kill tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of Americans.
Ally, though. They're not our ally.
I think you guys are talking past each other here.
Andrew,
I totally agree with what you're saying. I think the point that's being made here is they're the only people that can do it without any media backlash. And it's the exact opposite, actually. Israel's the only nation that can do this stuff and be radically defended in the same way that we just watched yesterday, people coming out to defend Leo Frank, who is a convicted pedophile. They're the only ones that can do these sorts of things and trust that the entire mainstream media apparatus will defend them and hide and protect them in every single measure. I think that's the point that's being made. Not that others don't try to do it, not that others aren't trying to blackmail politicians, but that Israel is allowed to do it.
I think Fox News will defend these people. But if you go on mainstream media, CBS, CNN, like when China was doing all sorts of nasty things, you have LeBron James standing for them and the whole mainstream media defending them. You have an entire component of the mainstream media that will defend China, including mainstream American athletes like LeBron James. So I understand what you're saying. The point is, well, China's not framed as an ally. Maybe they're not. They're probably not. But they're also not given nearly the scrutiny that their actions deserve. If we should be at war with a nation, maybe it should be China. I don't think we should be at war with anyone. I'm with peace. But if I'm looking for a nation that is at war with, they sent us a bioweapon to shut down the economy, to kill people, to take away Trump's presidency. They made him unpopular when he was being extremely popular at the end of 2019. So China absolutely is an enemy nation, whether it's framed that way or not. They don't get nearly the smoke that they deserve.
What I will say, Tristan Tate here, this isn't Andrew. What I will say is, yes, a lot of countries do a lot of bad things. China does a lot of bad things. Rwanda was a Christian country, committed a massive genocide that everyone forgets about. Yugoslavia, again, a mixed religion country in Europe that committed a genocide everyone forgets about. However, all of these countries exist in the free market of ideas. They fund their own economies, they fund their own war machines, they fund their own militaries, and lots of countries do bad things. But as an American taxpayer, I don't know how any American can sit there and be happy with the fact that not only the attacks on not only the attacks on children and innocents in the Gaza Strip and in the West Bank, but also attacks on the American military itself are being funded by the hardworking people of America. Israel doesn't exist in the free market of ideas. It's not self-sufficient. It doesn't fund itself. We are paying for this to happen, which I think makes it incredibly different to pointing the finger at anything like China. China could do the most evil things in the world. China is funding China, and China is being evil. Okay, it's not ideal, it's not great, but Israel is being funded by the United States. It's an arm of America shooting America back in the foot, and that makes it very different. You can't conflate the two.
I'm not conflating at all. If you look at, for example, what China got in most favored nation status, they were granted a boon by America to take our jobs and to destroy our economy. It's a different type of war. It's advanced warfare, economic warfare. It's the most advanced type of warfare there is, and we're giving them all of the means to destroy us. So I understand your point. You're not wrong in that we should not be giving them any. The third time I think I've said this on here. We should not be giving them aid. I'm not for foreign aid, but you also have to recognize the American military industrial complex also benefits from this. We shouldn't be giving them the welfare either, because Raytheon and Boeing, and by funneling through Nancy Pelosi and all these politicians. If you read my book, I listed all the Democrats, all the Republicans. These people are all getting money from the war machine. Israel is a means to make it rain on them, just like Ukraine.
Okay.
All the money from Ukraine is funneled back towards these people.
Great point. So my question to you then, Andrew, great point. When we talk about Israel is our number one ally, obviously you have to define what ally is. I guess that's up for debate, as Dan has pointed out quite correctly, looking at the history. But let's look at R. R does not mean the average American person. R does not mean the average American citizen. R does not mean the taxpayer. Are you saying that Israel exists primarily because it is the ally of the deep state, which is exploiting the American population? It's funneling the tax base into private hands and plundering the American taxpayers' money. Are you saying that Israel's an ally to the people in America, which are destroying America as a whole, and that they're hand in hand? Is that what you're trying to say?
No, I'm saying Israel is a state that we should give no support to, but we should encourage peace with them and their neighbors. And as far as who I think our greatest ally is, I would definitely say Japan, just because I like that they send us Super Mario and Lexus and Dragon Ball Z. So I would say Japan is our greatest ally. I go with Japan on that.
Well, it sounds to me like I'm sorry to interrupt. It just sounds to me like you're saying, look, the Israeli government does bad things, and they're doing bad things with the bad people in American government, and America's propping up Israel because the deep state and military industrial complex want Israel so they can all launder money and they can all plunder the tax base, but Israel's still good. And I mean, I guess the logical extension of the points you're making is that Israel's not good.
No, I'm not saying I'm not commenting on them being good or bad. I'm saying that what they're doing now is very similar to what America was doing 20 years ago, bombing Iraq, bombing Afghanistan, the atrocities at Abu Ghraib. We were involved in all manner of atrocities, and I would never say America's bad, America's evil, America had bad leadership. I worked very hard to help get Trump in office to get rid of that leadership because I don't want these wars. And so I don't look at it and say Israel's bad. I look at it and say Israel needs a change of leadership. Israel needs to make peace. Israel needs to be out of those wars, just like America needed new leadership. America needs to have peace, and America needs to be out of those wars.
We went to war with Iraq because of Israel.
Yeah, I don't think that it's just Israel. You have to realize there's a number of people that wanted that war. It wasn't just the Israelis. I don't disagree that obviously Netanyahu and a lot of those people wanted it, but it wasn't just Israel. The bad elements of the nation states that want these wars, it's America, it's the UK. You limiting it to just Israel, it's myopic. And again, no offense, but you're a little new to the space, brother.
That's who it benefits. It benefits
Israel. Didn't benefit Dick Cheney. It didn't benefit Dick Cheney.
Do you think that maybe they had dirt on Dick Cheney, or maybe Israel was
No,
controlling him like they controlled many of our
I think Dick
politicians?
Cheney is a psychopath that made billions of dollars for getting people murdered, including American soldiers. He's a sick guy. He shot a friend of his in the face and made him apologize.
So then it did benefit him. He made money.
Right.
Okay.
So
are
he's
you
an
saying that
American. Dick Cheney's an American.
are you saying?
Yeah, I know who Dick Cheney is. You're saying it didn't benefit him.
No, I'm saying it
Saying
did. I'm saying that there are sick elements in the American establishment, the UK establishment, the Israeli establishment. I don't condemn any of these nations. I condemn the bad actors, and I say that we have to push for peace.
I agree that there should be peace. I just don't think that it is achievable at this moment when we have a nation that doesn't want it. And I think that, like, Bibi Netanyahu has been very explicit in what his aims are. You know, when you refer to the Palestinians as the tribe of Amalek, I think he's being very clear in what he wants out of this. And that it's ridiculous that Israelis can protest Netanyahu, but if we do it over here, you have your entire livelihoods threatened here. I do want to go back to this, and Andrew, by the way, just all the credit to you for being here alone and representing your viewpoint, which again I think is very, very, very logical and sane, and not the deranged Zionist that we have seen representing Israel in the American media. I do want to just go back to that last piece. I saw some people commenting. We didn't actually finish that point when you were talking about the Talmud. And again, I am completely ignorant on this, so I was kind of relying on the back and forth between you and Dan. Were you saying that in the verses there is a debate about child rape, but you're saying that it shouldn't be taken literally?
There's two things there. One, part of it is not literal, and part of it, it's not saying whether it should be allowed. They're discussing what to consider as damage and what to consider as sex, because there's different punishments and different aspects of things. If you look at the Talmud, it's a 73 volume set, by the way. If you get the full set with Hebrew and English, there's a lot there that they're discussing. A lot of it's not literal. A lot of it's these full blown discussions. And the biggest point that I raised with Dan is he said the Talmud allows you to rape, to steal, to lie. And my favorite quote on any of that, hold on, I'm going to pull it up right now. Especially, Shmuel said, "It is prohibited to deceive people, and even to deceive a Gentile." So no, the Talmud doesn't let you lie, even to a Gentile. And by the way, this is another one of my favorite passages. If you want to understand the Talmud, this is from Rabbi Nachman of Breslev. Okay, very, very esteemed luminary of the Torah. All Orthodox recognize him. He said, "The wise will understand on their own that the Gentiles in whose land we currently reside are not like those who were in the time of the sages of the Talmud. The latter were idolaters who worshipped the stars and the constellations and were attached to all forms of abomination. They knew not God nor recognized his holy words, but the nations of our day fear God and honor his Torah." That means Christians and Muslims, "doing kindness and justice in their lands and charity with the Jews who take refuge under their wings. Heaven forbid that we should either say or write anything disrespectful about them. Thus, any reference to nations, Gentiles, and peoples of the world and the like refer only to those idolaters that lived at the time of the Mishnah." And even those, end quote, and even those idolaters, we're not even allowed to lie to them, let alone these
Okay,
righteous nations that he's
that wasn't
describing.
that wasn't what we were talking about at all. Let me just read the Talmud for you very clearly. "Therefore, just as one who engages in intercourse actively is not liable if he is less than 9 years old, as the intercourse of such a child does not have haketic status of intercourse, so too, if the child who is less than 9 years old engages in homosexual intercourse passively, the one who engages in intercourse with him is not liable."
Yeah, they're discussing, is it sex or is it something that should be considered as damages? It's not saying
But
you're
why are they
allowed to do it.
discussing it? Sorry, why are they discussing it at all?
They discuss literally everything in like the universe in the Talmud. If you go and read the entire thing, everything is discussed, and there's things that have, so a negative action, it has a certain energy, negative light, and they're discussing here's negative energy, here's positive energy. You have to really understand what you're reading. It's a very esoteric book to go and take sections out of it when so much of it is not even literal. Like I guarantee you're not getting it from looking at it that way. You really got to, if you want to do a study on this every single week, Dan, every single week we can go and do a Talmud study, and we could dive deep into this stuff. I would freaking love it. I would love it.
I've heard numerous rabbis say that sex with a girl that's under 3 years old does not count because her hymen replenishes itself or it repairs whatever, and that you can continue to have sex with a 3-year-old girl because it doesn't count.
If you
So I mean, this isn't my interpretation. These are your rabbis. Numerous times have said that it's not a coincidence that all the pedophiles flee to Israel, and it's totally fine. They don't care. They don't prosecute them. There's no problems. Like, I find, so you're saying it's just a coincidence that the Talmud says it's okay, and it's also a haven for
If
pedophiles?
you think that those are my rabbis, absolutely. There's a lot of people that call themselves a rabbi. A rabbi is a title that means teacher, and it's for someone that should be respected. So there's a lot of fake quote-unquote rabbis out there, just like there's a lot of quote-unquote pastors that run drag time story hour churches. And I wouldn't call those people like real pastors. There's a lot of fake people out there. There's a lot of extremist people out there that say nonsense things. You can't look at just anybody and yeah, see, that guy said it and he's a Jew. So what?
No. He was reading the Talmud. Let me read you another passage. Jews may use lies to circumvent a goy.
Yeah, I just read you the part where it said it's forbidden. So if you want to,
So
if
what
you want to
happens
say,
if there's two conflicting dialogues? Like, if
See,
one
that's-
says like you can't do it, and then the other one says yeah you can do it. Like, is there something that?
Oh, let me answer Candace's question. Let me answer Candace's question. No, let me answer Candace's question.
Okay.
She said, "What if there's two things that conflict?" Okay, so this is my favorite portion of the Talmud to talk about this. If you look where they're discussing Gentiles that study the Torah, this is Sanhedrin 59a. So this is often cited out of context because the first part of it says, Rabbi Yohanan says a Gentile who engages in Torah study is liable to receive the death penalty, right? Well, that sounds bad. You keep reading and it says, you have therefore learned that even a Gentile who engages in Torah study is considered like a high priest. So if you've ever heard the old axiom, 2 Jews, 3 opinions, okay, just because there's an opinion in the Talmud, if you keep reading, it's almost all, and you think it's a bad opinion, it's controverted in the next paragraph, and then the defining sentence is something like I just read you. You have learned a Gentile who engages in Torah study is considered like a high priest. So
Okay, all right. Please explain to me how this could have any other interpretation. Let me read it to you. Gentiles are not humans; they are beasts. Baba Meza 11.
So I just read to you earlier. It's saying that any reference, this is from Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, any reference to Gentiles in the Talmud, it doesn't even describe you. It's talking about idolatrous nations that worship the stars and abominations from 2,000 years ago. And it said it's not to be.
Gentiles are not humans; they're beasts. How can you interpret that in any other way?
I just told you it doesn't refer to you. If anything,
Gentile is a non-Jew.
It's talking about idolaters from 2,000 years ago that aren't even alive anymore. It's not you, brother.
Guys, I have a quick question because I have a few quick questions, and Andrew, you're the first Zionist I've spoken to, and my conclusion that I've come to, and I'm sure you didn't mean to say this, but what I've basically come to the conclusion of is that the military-industrial complex and the fake politicians that are laundering money from America use Israel as an outlet to commit war and steal money, which I think is actually justification for why everyone's so upset with Israel in the first place, especially considering the fact that they're the ones who could openly bribe the U.S. Congress, and they brag about it. What do you think, and this is a question I'll ask, what do you think about the fact that Zionists call for endless and open migration to Europe, but are very controlling of Israel and its borders? Why do you think that happens?
That is a freaking great question. That might be my favorite question on this whole stream. That's devious. And I've said before that
it's devious, sir. It's devious because you want to talk about weapons of war, talking about economic policy.
I'm agreeing
mass migration's the largest one.
With you. No, I'm saying that the Israelis that propose such a thing, I've tweeted this many times, any Israeli government or politician that proposes that America has to take in refugees, that I consider that an act of war. If you want to send us people that you drove out of their homes and they're going to be hateful and radicalized and they're going to hate America and you want to send them to America, I consider that an act of war. And everybody that's pushing for mass migration of people from the Middle East, Africa, into the West, into Europe, into America, that is the most destructive plan in human history. It's the NWO globalist plan to destroy the middle class worldwide, to make us all serfs, to make us all slaves, to take away power from Western nations, from from nations
That's
that
right.
actually
You're
have the
right.
means
You're
to
right.
govern themselves.
So if I were to send you a list of, let's say, choose a number, 30 high-level Zionists and Jews who are calling specifically and only for that, what would you say? What would you do with
I
that
would
list, or
say
how would you comment on such a
I would
list?
say the Pope also just said that Western nations have to accept these people. So it's not exclusively an Israeli thing. The literal Pope just said the West has to accept these migrants. And he said earlier all kinds of statements. We have to wash the foot of the migrant. The literal Pope has been pushing this for a long time, too. So it's not just the Zionists. It's literally the Catholic Church. It's the NWO. It's a whole globalist agenda. It's not solely or exclusively Jewish. The Rockefellers are not Jewish. The
It's
Warren Buffett and
satanic
Bill
is
Gates are
what
not
it is.
Jewish.
Yeah, and that's why I want to be clear, like I've said multiple times, like all of the Abrahamic religions have been infiltrated, and it's really important for people that are watching this, while the media is pretending that I've had some sort of a mental breakdown, to really look at this historian Gershom Scholem. He's an Israeli historian, and he will really connect the dots for you about Frankism, what that religion was. Leo Frank, is a descendant of a Frankist family, what they believed in, pedophilia, incest as these sacramental rites, and they would commit these acts. Things that would normally be termed blood libel were actually things that were happening. They believed in blood rituals, which is why I do not excuse what happened with Leo Frank to be anything other than a ritualistic abuse. And they did, in fact, infiltrate both the Catholic Church. And obviously there was this great schism, with Jews, because they purported themselves to be Jews, and they made a lot of ground there. But this book, and also to the French people, like the Frankists were the reason that the French Revolution happened, Jacobinism, and it was kind of this mentality that through deception they could break down these empires, these tremendous empires, and inherit the earth. And so these are questions that we should be asking. People that are telling you that this is stupid and I've made it up because I'm anti-Semitic, I've learned this, as I said, distinctly from Jewish and Israeli historians and psychologists. I have not picked up this stuff by myself. I just got fascinated on the topic because of the weird defense for Sigmund Freud. And what I found there was something much darker and something that's much more satanic. And I don't think and I'm going to say this in closing, I'm going to let everybody go around and say something. I don't think this stops until people get educated, properly educated, not the psychological conditioning that we have. To answer your question earlier, Andrew, about Andrew Meyer, about why we are seeing so many Jewish people continually be yoked by this, is for the same reason that BLM and Black people were continually being yoked by the narrative of racism. These communists came to our country, and by the way, if you want to listen to Barry Weiss celebrate how they came here, and HIAS, Laura Loomer did some tremendous work about who's getting over the border. They set that up. It is a fact. After they overthrew the Tsar, and basically installed Bolshevism thereafter, they allowed all of these communists into our country unchecked. And when you trace that lineage and you recognize that we are, in fact, that Joseph McCarthy was right, we are, in fact, fighting the communists still today in America. That's what I believe is happening. And I think that we have to get educated outside of the public education system, which is existing to make everybody a baby that responds to their identity. So that when these satanists, which I believe they are in media, come out and say, Candace Owens said whatever, she's an anti-Semite, they all go crazy because they have that conditioning from when they were a child, that psychological conditioning to think that the Holocaust is around every corner, in the same way that Black people think slavery is around every corner. That's to keep you ignorant, while they continue to abuse everyone. And so I encourage you to read Gershom Scholem, David Bacon, and Jeffrey Moussaif Masson as a start, to really understand what is happening in this country and all around the world, because I believe it is a small group of powerful, extremely wealthy Satanists. Let's go around here. Dan, it looks like Andrew might have jumped off. So Dan, I just want to give the stage to you to say any final comments, and if everyone could listen to you that's on Twitter today about what's happening and what they should do and what they should believe, what would you say?
I mean, start doing your research, and be careful where you do your research too, because I went on to AI and I asked them to translate the Talmud, and I asked 5 different times before I even got a semi-logical answer. And then when I put in the direct translation from the Talmud that I got, reading in the Talmud, I gave them the direct passage. It struck it out, saying that it was hate speech, but then still gave me the answer and said that, yeah, that is the exact translation. But I asked it 5 times for the translation, and it wouldn't give it to me. So I think people start getting concerned when they ask questions and those questions get censored. And, AI was considered anti-Semitic, which is fucking retarded. But that's what they said. And so now they put programming in there to put guardrails on what the narrative is. And I think that's what people are having the big problem with, is these constant guardrails on what this narrative is. And the moment you sway outside of that, you're an anti-Semite, you're a, whatever. It resorts to junior high name calling. It's you're a racist, you're a white supremacist, you're this, you're that. Instead of actually addressing the issue, they just call names. And I think people are just getting fucking tired of that.
Andrew?
Thank you for having me, Candace. I appreciate all the lovely things you said about me during this debate. We should continue this conversation on your show sometime. That'd be a lot of fun. I think it'd be good for everybody, too. And to Dan, I think we went to University of Florida at the same time. Other people have been telling me that, the whole "don't tase me, bro" thing. So you can let me know if we were there at the same time or not. But as to the Talmud and all that, you should check out the 2-hour debate I did with Daniel Hakikachu. He's like a top Muslim debater. He's been talking all about the Talmud. It's in my bio right now, not my bio, my profile on here right now. It's like one of the top 2 or 3 tweets I made. You should definitely check out that debate. It'll answer a lot of your questions, and I'd be happy to talk more about this with you anytime. And then ultimately, you're giving a reading list, Candace. The reading list I want everybody to check out is the Zohar. The Zohar is literally the Holy Grail. I kid you not. You can even go in the Catholic Encyclopedia, do some research on what the Holy Grail is. Eventually, you'll find it's a book, and it's a book called the Zohar. More people knowing about the Zohar, it will bring peace in our time. You can go to dailyzohar.com and get all kinds of references on it. The Zohar will bring peace. So I have to end on that and telling people to go check out the Zohar, because that will bring peace. Peace is what we need from all sides. If everybody really calls for peace, and that's the goal, we will get there. Candace, thank you for having me on and having a very fair discussion.
Thank you. And I just want to thank everybody who listened. I think we hit 80K before people got kicked off magically, and they're saying that they were having issues joining, which is absolutely amazing. It means that the majority of people don't believe in sneers and libels, and they just want more speech so they can actually process and learn. For those of you guys that are asking for a book list, that has been up on my locals page, locals.com, and you'll see all the books that I've read. If far from having any sort of a mental breakdown, it's been the exact opposite. I have been in study, and I have been amazed at what I have found, and I believe that there has been a lot of deception, and what I'm basically doing is just pulling at one thread of it, and I'm watching the entire tapestry disappear. I think we're at the beginning of the end of the Zionist media empire, which is to say that they can speak amongst themselves and they can send each other text messages and they can take clips out of context. But the reality is that we had probably more local signups this week since I started my podcast independently in the last 24 hours. Same for my Twitter subscribers. And it's because people are appreciating this freedom. They're understanding what honesty actually looks like. And so, shame on you Zionists in the media who are engaging in this and thinking that you're going to win. Look at your numbers all across the board. They're down. People aren't reading you. They're not listening to you because they are spiritually feeling that you're not being honest with them and hiding behind a bunch of billionaires and hiding behind corporations. To do that, you're losing the people. So you can say what you want. The headlines, they mean nothing. I have never felt more tethered to the truth than I do in this moment. And I've never felt more certain that this is the direction that the world is going into. More speech, not less, as I always say. And thank you guys so much for joining tonight. See you tomorrow on the podcast. I'll have a lot more to say then.